translation available. I would like to begin, however, if we could all sit together for a few minutes to really become more stable here in this place at this moment. Okay? So whatever technique you know, or if you don't know any technique, doesn't matter. Let's just sit for a few minutes. Okay? And then I will begin speaking. Okay? What if I told you that that's it? That's it. That's the wild. That's going into the wild. It's really that simple, actually. You didn't know where you were going? You didn't even know that that's where you were going to go? You didn't know how long you were going to be going there? You didn't maybe even know where you were? Or maybe you weren't thinking of that? We say that's the wild because that's where all of the ideas, the differences, the separations, the opinions that we establish can be dropped and the space opens in that moment. So probably when you were sitting, you weren't thinking about that. I don't know what you were thinking. Maybe you had a technique and you were trying it. Maybe not. Maybe you were hearing the sounds, wondering what you will have for dinner later. I don't know. Whatever. Probably there were a lot of thoughts going on and not much space. I don't know. It took you by surprise, probably, that you were sitting down suddenly. That's not what you expected. You expected to come here and hear someone tell you things. Maybe not, but probably. I myself didn't know that that's what would happen either. I was going into the wild when I entered the room. I didn't know what would happen. I sat down and I had considered beforehand, maybe sitting, but I didn't know. Now, if we try to do this in our everyday life, moment to moment, not knowing what we will say next, not knowing where we will go, we may have some problems. We got in the elevator, and suddenly I realized I didn't know which floor it was on. Although I've been here before. I was even here about a few hours ago. And I didn't pay any attention. I didn't know what floor it was. Fortunately, someone who did know came in the elevator and pushed the button. And then I remembered, oh yes, the 8th floor. So we expected the elevator to come to the 8th floor. Well, it didn't. It stopped and then it went back down. And then it started going up again and it stopped again. So we decided, as soon as it stops on a floor, we're getting out. And we did. And we walked up from the 7th floor to the 8th floor. That was not at all what we had planned to do. We were wild in that moment. The elevator was wild. The other woman who was with us, who wanted to go to the 6th floor, also had to experience this wilderness in that moment of the elevator. We don't think of an elevator as being wild, right? We push the button and it takes us where we want to go, and we expect that to happen. Sometimes it doesn't, though, as I experienced tonight. I've experienced in other occasions being stuck in an elevator. 2 occasions, and usually what happens when the elevator is stuck, panic. We were all a little uneasy tonight when it was doing that, so we said, oh, We're getting out the first chance we get. But I've been in elevators where it was much longer than that and seen people, how they react. Crying, panicking, fear. It's not happening like it's supposed to happen. The truth is that nothing ever happens like it's supposed to happen, but we think that it does, or we want it to. And when it doesn't, we feel that it's escaping our control, and we're afraid. Sometimes it can be panic, fear. Fear can bring panic. Fear can bring anger. Some people get very angry when they're afraid. Aggression, as we see in the world today. I don't know in Portugal if you have this issue with the migrants. All of these people forced out of their countries by war, terrorism. People in countries that could be receiving them are afraid. And they become aggressive. Or they become angry. They become paranoid. They behave in a way that normally they wouldn't behave for others. If they were one-on-one with that person, if that person were in their family, if they weren't making the separation between someone from Syria and someone from France, it might not be the same. We make these distinctions, Syria, France, Portugal, Morocco, man, woman, all of these differences, 7th floor, 8th floor, because they serve a purpose to come to a certain understanding of things at a certain time, in a certain situation. In order that things aren't wild. Because when it's wild, we don't understand it. If we didn't have any floor numbers of the floors, it would be hard to tell someone where we are. If someone wanted to come to hear the talk, they wouldn't know which floor to go to, or what number or address. We organize things so that we can understand them in a certain way. But it's temporary, that. Like everything, it's impermanent. And that's only one aspect of reality. When we say wild, it doesn't mean that those other differences don't exist. Wild includes those differences, let's say. We could even say that that there is no wild, even, we could say. Wild, as opposed to not wild, is another difference, right? Like I said in the beginning, we sat down here. We didn't know. I didn't say, okay, we will sit for 5 minutes. Do this. And then we will do that. I didn't give you any reference points, right? Just sit. Normally, when I introduce people to meditation practice, I would give them some instructions. I would say, okay, follow your breath, count your breath, sit like this, a certain posture, whatever it is. I would tell them how long it would be, probably. I didn't do that with you. Because I wanted you to see what it is to not have any signs, any instructions, whatever it is. If we did it again, already you might be more prepared because you've had this experience before and you would expect it to be like that again. Very quickly it happens. We expect things to be again and again. And yet the point of the meditation, of sitting on the meditation, when I say into the wild, the point is, if there is a point, it's to allow ourselves a space in which everything can just be as it is. We can experience things just as they are. Without having, you had this opportunity, right? No one said you have to do this, you have to do that. I just said sit. And then let everything be. Because that's where we can experience intimately ourselves and the whole of life in that wilderness. Most of the time we're experiencing only one aspect of ourselves. Most of the time we're experiencing what we would like to see or not, what we don't want to see. We're closing out, pushing things away that we don't want, and we're grasping at things that we do want. With the meditation, we're giving ourselves an opportunity where we don't have to do that. We don't have to choose, we're not in a restaurant where we have to say, oh, I think I would like this instead of that. You can just sit here and let it all be. You don't have to make any choice. You don't have to think about anything. Just let it be. And there's enormous space that arises then. Or let's say it doesn't arise, it's already there, but we can taste it then. We can experience that space when we're not trying to make it into something else. There's a difference if you walk into if you walk out in the countryside in a wild field, or if you walk in a park in the city. Right? There's a difference. And yet, in the park in the city, those plants are wild as well. They can't be stopped. If we cut down the trees and the plants, they will be back. Not in the same way. Not in the same place, maybe. Wildness is a process, continuity, continuing in the impermanence of continuity, let's say. Ongoing. It's you are wild, actually. You don't know that. You don't think of it, usually, because you're thinking about what you should do, or what you shouldn't do, often. But actually, we say in Zen, the perfect way is not difficult. It just dislikes picking and choosing. So perfect, we could substitute wild. Right? The wild way, it's not difficult. Someone recently told me that he was doing a walking meditation that in my Zen practice we do, where we walk very slowly around the room in a circle, one after the other. And it was set up in such a way that he didn't have anyone in front of him. It was a circle, but the person was far away. He felt like he was at the head of the line. And he suddenly panicked, thinking, I'm the leader. I'm the sheep herder. And he was terrified, thinking he didn't want to be in that position where he was leading, thinking I might walk too fast, I might walk too slow, people won't like the way I'm walking, will I go do it right, all of these things. And it's someone who's done this walking meditation a lot, wasn't new. Until he realized that, in fact, if he dropped his ideas about that, about walking fast, slow, the right way, the wrong way, what people would think, there was no problem. And he realized he wasn't even at the head of the line because it was a circle. So there was a big space between him and the next person, but he was not leading, and he wasn't following. He was just where he was, just taking his step one after another. Usually, though, we're in that position of thinking, I should walk this way, I shouldn't walk that way. What will people think? I'm not wearing the right shoes. My socks are wrong. Or I'm thinking about something else. I'm not thinking about my walking. Or I'm wishing it would hurry up and finish. It's stupid, I don't like this practice, whatever it is. Instead of just feel what it feels like to be on your cushion or something. I might have given you some instruction like that. But already that would have limited what you were focusing on. And what didn't fit with the sounds, you probably wouldn't have paid attention to. The case may be that you weren't paying attention to anything because you had no instructions. Maybe you were just wondering. And when we talk about this just sitting here like this, it doesn't mean not paying attention. It doesn't mean wandering randomly. It's like if you've ever seen a cat sitting in front of a mouse hole, waiting for a mouse, or looking at a bird or something, it's that kind of attention we have. The cat is looking at the mouse, waiting for the mouse to arrive. It has a very specific point. Our specific point is being here now. We don't know what that looks like. We don't know what will arise here now. I had no idea who would be sitting here. You had no idea who I was, or some of you did, because I know some of you, but what I would say. I didn't know what I would say. I had to give a title. Unfortunately, I had to give a title. But that's necessary to give some indication of where we are, what we're doing. Otherwise, no one would come. And then, why bother then, right? So it's necessary to give a title. So I gave a title. And yet, The title is wild as well, in the sense that I know the title that I gave allows me to say anything that arises. It's wild. Can we have that freedom in our lives? Because that's what the whole thing is about, is having that freedom. We test it by sitting on our cushions. We get a taste of it. We practice it. We say it's a practice. But it's like any other kind of practice. It's like if you practice the piano, or if you practice running, or if you practice singing or dancing, whatever. Sitting, it's a practice. And it's as if we develop a skill, which is actually not a skill. It's a skill that allows us not to have a skill, let's say. That we can be skillful in the wilderness. Meaning, to be skillful in the wilderness is to just be with whatever it is that arises. We do it for 5 minutes on our cushion. Again and again and again. Every time it's different. Repetition is extremely important. Sometimes we think this is so boring, this practice, it's just repetition. Or some of the forms you might learn or something, it's boring. It's very important repetition because it's always different. We think it's always the same, but it's always different. So the more we do it, the more we realize that. And the more interesting it becomes. It's always different. I've been here before, so have many of you. It's totally different. Right now. And this moment right now is different than the moment 5 minutes ago. Or the minute a moment ago. So tonight I didn't give you an introduction to Zen meditation, traditional. And I guess really the only thing that it didn't seem necessary, let's say, to give an instruction for how to meditate. What's more important is that maybe you become interested in, well, what is the wildness in me? Who is the wilderness in me? I mean, in you. We have ideas about what's wild, too. We think it's crazy people, things that don't make any sense, things that are loud and crazy, whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. It is part of it, but that's not the point, actually. The point is freedom. So being free to be whatever you are, whoever you are, at every moment. We call that wild because it's not controlled. But what if being out of control was meaning true to oneself? Instead of, we usually think of a child who's wild and out of control as being bad. And we have to train it to be controlled. But what if being wild meant being true to you? Of course, following whatever the rules of society are, because we have to function that way, as I said. But within that, what if it would be you, as you truly are? First, you have to know who you truly are. And when you do, then you will know what I'm talking about. Wild. And you can have a taste of that every time you sit down. It takes courage in our culture that we live in today, because there's so much emphasis put on accomplishing, obtaining, following what is expected of us, whether it's career, education, relationships, family life. There's a lot of pressure. It's difficult to not follow those paths. It's a radical path, what I'm talking about. But it's the path of freedom. To be truly who you are. I would like to give you an opportunity to say things. It's far more interesting if we have a dialogue instead of a monologue. So are there questions or comments or anything you didn't understand or you would like to know or like to share? About what was said or about what you experienced when you were sitting or anything. It's open to you. Open mic, as we say.
Do you ever reach that freedom?
Do
you ever reach that freedom, that path, or is something that you reach along the way?
Do you mean, is it something that we arrive and we're forever there? Or is it renewed all the time? Yeah. Well, we say everything is impermanent, right? So often our mind thinks everything, okay, we can accept everything is changing, but we think that, but we will arrive somewhere and it will all be over. And we'll be free, comfortable, good, peace, bliss, whatever. No. It's all impermanent. Every moment changing, every moment, every moment, every moment. And that's the freedom, is to let go of that moment and then experience another moment. It's a process, say. It's not something that
a lifetime process.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If we weren't in that process, we would be dead. That's true. The thing is, we don't even realize we're in that process, but we are. Life is that process. Life is wild. We don't think of it that way because it's frightening. The truth is that it's chaos, right? It's total wild.
There are states that are described of no returning. There's certain states that some beings attend. There's called they will never return to certain conditions of imprisonment that the common being is living.
Well, I'm not sure that the we're making these separations of common being and beings and whatever. Those are forms of language that we use. What is true in what you say is that, as I said, when you've experienced the freedom, one moment you experience it and the wildness, and then you're like, you say, oh yes, of course. And that will never go away. That experience is an experience. And of course it changes though. But you also are different because of that experience. So therefore in the next moment, you approach the moment in a different way. So even tonight, we don't realize it, but we are different than we were when we walked in the room. The same person who sat down here is not the same person who walked in the room. It's changing all the time. So in that sense, yes, everything that happens and arises and is experienced then has an effect on the next moment and the next. It's all carried, let's say. Not in a sense of something solid, but it's transforming all the time. It's a process. So in that sense, there isn't a return. That's true. There's not a return. And yet it's an eternal return at the same time.
Sorry. You mean like we should search for little epiphanies? Little epiphanies, that's what we should be searching for.
Well, it's really better to...
maybe it's a strong term.
Epiphany?
Yeah. I see it that way. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. The problem is that if we are searching for an epiphany, we miss what is right before our face.
I didn't mean to search intentionally. I mean the state of by meditating, sometimes it happens.
Mm-hmm.
That was the sense I had.
Mm-hmm. Maybe pay attention to things, and maybe, like we say, the accident will arise.
Yeah.
Something like that, maybe. However, it's very subtle because we want them to happen. We want that epiphany, we want that moment, that accident to happen. And even if we're not consciously thinking that becomes the motivation for our sitting, is that. When in fact, the only thing that we need to do is just sit with whatever is. That's the epiphany in fact. If we can appreciate just what it is right now.
You said that we should focus on the moment, in what we are living, in that moment specifically. But how can we focus on what really is there if reality is created by ourselves? We create our own reality. How can we actually see what's there if we create our own reality? You know what? It's a hard question.
So when you say we create our reality, what exactly do you mean?
We create our own reality, meaning that our experiences and our thoughts and our experiences as a human being influence the way we perceive things.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we actually see what's happening if we are always conditioned by our humanity, the fact that we live, you know?
Mm-hmm. That is a good thing to observe. Look at that. Observe that when you're sitting, you know? So, okay, so what am I seeing, and am I seeing really what is there, or am I seeing what I think I'm seeing, or exactly what you said? That is material to sit with. Sit with that. Whatever it is that arises, sit with it. Observe it. Pay attention to it, whatever it is. Because that is the material. That's the only thing we have. That's the only thing there is. It's all now. It's not going to happen somewhere else, in other words. It's not, you're not going to be someone else. And it won't be somewhere else. It's always here, right here. We talk about the ground of awakening, the seat of awakening and all of that. Well, it's right here. It's where you're sitting. That's what he's doing right there. He's saying it's here. No, he said something like the earth is my witness, but that's what he was talking about. It's right here.
Since as Isabel was talking about some kind of stages, yes, when you practice, if it's possible to become or live in the stage of life that it's most of the time in this wild way of living. So if it's possible to stay or to live almost of the time in this kind of a way of living, wild way of living, wild in the sense that you are talking about.
Well, the truth is that you already are living it. You're just not aware of it.
But you don't notice. You don't
exactly
notice.
Because all of us already are wild, but we're not paying any attention to it. And so it's not that we have to become someone else. I often tell this story early in my practice. Actually, Keti was at the retreat when it happened. My teacher's teacher, I think it was maybe the second time I'd seen him, was there for the week with us. And he gave the teaching one day in the retreat. And I don't remember exactly what he was talking about, but he was telling a Zen story. And in the story, I don't remember the whole story, but in the story, the teacher, the master in the story, comes to give a teaching and then walks away. Just came up, stood there, and then walked away. And my teacher's teacher was talking about that story. I didn't hear the rest of the story. I was devastated when I heard that story. And I cried the whole afternoon after that, because suddenly I saw that the teacher's teaching, the master's teaching when he came there, was just this. Suddenly I realized, oh, it's this is it. I'm not going to become someone else. This is it. At that moment I was devastated, but ultimately that is our liberation if we realize that. It's just this. It always has been and it always will be, but we don't realize it. So after my devastation of a while, it changed, but there was at the end of the week when I took my vows, and my teacher gave me my, not this one, but another one, and she had written on it, and she gave me my name, because when you take your vows, your teacher gives you a name. The name she gave me in French was Tu es cela, which means you are it. After I had just had this experience of devastation because I was it. She gives me this name, you are it, which is a constant enigma for me. I have to have a different name that goes on the passport. But I am Tu es cela as well. I'm Amy, but I'm Tu es cela. And I'm neither one, actually. This room, okay, we say this is the Buddhist Union. But 10 years ago, a family probably lived here, and they had a television here, and, I don't know, dining room, kids running around, who knows? We call it the Buddhist Union, but it's not. And it is.
Used an expression, being who you truly are. I think people usually, when they hear something like that, they think about doing something. So doing whatever they want to do, and not observing or contemplating what's happening. And so I'm trying to understand what that means. And I have an example. I came here to hear your words and to learn something. But a little bit before, I came as a volunteer to help with giving information and helping with what was needed. But I thought that I was going to be here listening peacefully. But then at the last time, someone told me that the camera was not working the right way. So they asked me if I could be here, looking at the camera and see if everything's okay, because suddenly it stops to work. And I got very nervous because I'm that kind of person that when that person is at the end of the walking circle, that person gets nervous. I'm that person. So I wasn't sure what I should do. I wanted to because I thought that if I was going to be looking at the camera, I was not going to listen to you because I was so nervous. And I had to make a choice at that moment. I had to choose saying no and feeling guilty because I was being selfish, and saying yes because I also wanted kids to work there, right? But then when I sat here, I just observed what I was feeling. Just that's what I was doing when you told us to meditate, to just be. I was just observing that, and I think I learned something. I was wild in that moment. Yes, I think I'm grasping it now. I think, yes, I learned something today.
What did you learn?
I'm not sure yet, but I know I've learned something.
That's good. That's good. Good answer. Yeah. It's a good example of how we function. Any of us could tell a story like that, I'm sure. In different situations, maybe even tonight, whatever. Things don't go as you expect, and then what? questions? If not, we will maybe have just a little sit to close together. Sitting. Okay. Huh? It's been a while. Right? I'm not sure if Isabel said we have a retreat this weekend. We have retreats 3 times a year. There's practice here regularly, twice a week, I think, with Miguel and with João. So if you're interested in going into the wilderness with us.
And this retreat online also, it's with a Zen scribe.
Yes, yeah. Did you told them about that too? Retreat in the heart of life.
If you want to explain a bit.
Okay.
Just because it's a different.
Yes, when I was saying we, I meant here in Portugal, we have retreats 3 times a year. Also in France, I have retreats. And another activity that I organize is what I call a retreat in the heart of life, which means you sign up for the retreat and you don't do anything other than what you usually do for the whole week in your life. You go to work, you be with your family, you go play basketball, you watch television, you do whatever you do. There are sitting periods organized. So for people in Paris, they come and sit. We sit morning and evening together. If you're not in Paris, you can sit during those times on your own. We say that everything you do is part of the retreat. Everyone who you encounter, so your colleagues, the other people in the family, the people sitting next to you on the bus, the woman who you buy your bread from, the guy you walk past in the street, they are all part of the retreat as well. Because you are in the retreat, they're in the retreat with you. They don't know that, but that's okay. For you, they're in the retreat because you're in the retreat. You're on retreat, and so these people are with you in the retreat. Every day, we ask people to come to the blog, I have a blog, and put just a few words about your experience, whatever it is. And when we've done this before, it's fabulous. I have students in all over the place, Australia, Mozambique, Angola, someone who's in Chile, he's not anymore, all over Europe, in New York. So it was a fabulous experience. The guy in Melbourne would come on and say, hello, good morning, this is Peter. I'm watching the sun come up on the Indian Ocean. And then a few hours later, the guy in Maputo would come on and say, hello, this is Hugo, good morning. I'm watching the sun come up over the Indian Ocean on the other side. And then someone in Lisbon maybe, or Geneva, or London, or Paris, or New York, or wherever, and people would say, oh, I had this experience putting my daughter to bed last night, or when I went to work today, this is what happened, or just anything. Or it can be just, I'm just checking in, too busy to write anything, I'm going to sit now, or something. Or I wasn't able to sit today, but I will tomorrow, whatever it is. This isn't working for me, I'm losing track, whatever. Also, because you're enrolled, I send out things to everyone. Teaching, something to look at for the day, whatever it is. But it's all online. And then we end the week in Paris with a day or a weekend of sitting, where everyone who has participated or hasn't participated comes and sits together. And you can do the same thing on your own, or I encourage the people who have groups around me to do that. And it's a different way of practicing. It's very enriching. I don't know if anyone here has done it, but the last times I've done it, but it's really deeply enriching. And there's a real connection that we feel, not only with the other people who we're connected with on the internet, but with the people who we see on the street, in our office, in our homes, wherever. Everything becomes practice. Which is the point anyway, because our life is the practice. So it's a way of developing that. And
For how long it is?
a week,
A week.
from Monday to Friday.
26 to 30 October.
Right. There's one at the end of October, and then there's another one, I think, in April. Okay, let's have a few minutes of sitting. Thank you.